How many times have you heard it? Someone in town sees something they don't like or that they think that the town needs, and they say, why doesn't somebody do something about that? Well, I suppose it's human nature for people to say things like that, and whether it's patching potholes or building new bridges, people are still complaining today. It's human nature. But believe it or not, a long time ago, and at a grim time during this country's history, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, when you might least expect any civic improvements to be made, amazing things actually got done across the country and here in Bethlehem. And it took a combination of federal leadership, grassroots local cooperation, and good old-fashioned manpower to accomplish great things through a federal initiative known as the Works Progress Administration. One of the planks of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal during the 1930s. You know, if anyone ever asked me, and they usually don't, but if someone were to ask me who America's most consequential president was, my answer is always Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Elected to 4 terms, FDR was smart, compassionate, idealistic, logical. He just plain knew how to get things done. And as part of his New Deal strategy, he put the construction industry back on its feet, rebuilt a country's infrastructure, and put millions of unemployed men back to work. And he not only did that across the country, but there's ample evidence of what he was able to do here in Bethlehem.
WPA was an American New Deal agency that employed millions of job seekers, mostly men who were not formally educated, to carry out public works projects, including the construction of public buildings and roads. It was set up on May 6, 1935, by presidential order, as a key part of the Second New Deal. The WPA's first appropriation in 1935 was $4.9 billion, about 6.7% of the 1935 GDP. Headed by Harry Hopkins, the WPA supplied paid jobs to the unemployed during the Great Depression in the United States, while building up the public infrastructure of the U.S., such as parks, schools, and roads. Most of the jobs were in construction, building more than 620,000 miles of streets and over 10,000 bridges, in addition to many airports and much housing. The largest single project of the WPA was the Tennessee Valley Authority. At its peak in 1938, it supplied paid jobs for 3 million unemployed men and women, as well as youth in a separate division, the National Youth Administration. Between 1935 and 1943, the WPA employed 8.5 million people, about half the population of New York.
Now, how, if at all, did any of this impact Bethlehem? Well, for a good many years before this, Bethlehem was without an adequate park system. Citizens were concerned that a lack of recreational space would be felt more and more as the city continued to grow during the first half of the 20th century. Suddenly, the city as a whole became very park-conscious, and a flurry of activity led to the creation of the parks and playgrounds that we enjoy today. On the south side, Saucon Park sprang into existence, while the greatly admired Rose Garden was developed on the west side. Even Old Sand Island was transformed into Franklin Park. But for residents of the north side, there was no large park in which to enjoy the outdoor seasons. Yes, the old borough of Bethlehem had bought Illick's Mill way back in 1907, but no steps had been taken in its beautification. This all changed in 1935 when R.A.O. Weir and his department submitted plans of developing that property into a Works Progress Administration project. Being the largest and most ambitious of President Roosevelt's New Deal projects, the WPA's goal was to provide work for the nation's unemployed until the economy recovered. And during its peak years in 36 and 37, it put some 290,000 people to work in Pennsylvania. As of August 1937, 2 projects had been completed at Monocacy Park, providing over 100,000 man-hours of work. And a third project, submitted by Mr. Weir, aimed to provide an additional 88,000 hours if the work was approved by the WPA. What the WPA workers left behind through their backbreaking labor is just as magnificent today as it was during the Great Depression. Stone walks, benches, tables. The WPA provided all that's needed for families to have a delightful picnic. When the park opened, city officials claimed that the fireplace was the most modern of its kind in the entire state. As for the creek itself, it was thoroughly cleaned and widened. 70 trees were planted. Even the existing dam was strengthened and modernized. Flanked by 2 pavilions, the dam is truly the focal point of the entire park. What a beautiful sight it is to see and feel the creek water tumbling over the steps of Coopersburg granite. Perhaps the best view of the dam can be seen from the small suspension bridge anchored by 2 30-foot towers made of hand-cut stone.